The winds of Xylos howled across the barren landscape, carrying particles of iron-rich dust that clung to every surface. Kalen Frost watched from the reinforced viewport of his abandoned research station as another magnetic storm brewed on the horizon. Crimson lightning flickered between towering cloud formations, casting an eerie glow over the jagged terrain. It would be yet another night of battening down the hatches and praying the ancient shield generators would hold. 6 years. 6 years since he'd chosen this desolate rock as his self-imposed exile. 6 years since he'd spoken to another living soul. The isolation suited him, a fitting penance for his failures. Kalen ran a weathered hand through his unkempt hair and turned away from the viewport. The station, once a state-of-the-art outpost for xenobiological research, now resembled a technological graveyard. Equipment salvaged from different sections was jury-rigged to maintain basic life support. Panels hung open, exposing complex circuitry that Kalen maintained through sheer stubborn ingenuity. His daily routine never varied. Check the atmospheric scrubbers, inspect the shield generators, inventory supplies, repair whatever system was on the verge of failure that day. Then, hours of staring at the ceiling of his cramped sleeping quarters, haunted by the faces of the dead. Dr. Miranda Shaw, Dr. Eliseo Rodriguez, Jana Kim, Tomas Henrik. 17 names in total, all colleagues who had trusted him, who had believed in his breakthrough, who had died when his containment protocols failed catastrophically during the final phase of Project Chimera. The memory was seared into his consciousness. The alarm sirens, the sealed emergency bulkheads, their desperate pleas over the comms as the mutated pathogen did its work. Kalen had survived only by chance, in a separate testing chamber when the outbreak occurred. By the time emergency protocols had been enacted and the facility sterilized, he was the sole survivor. The inquiry that followed cleared him of negligence, citing equipment failure, but Kalen knew better. His hubris had killed those people as surely as if he'd poisoned them himself. So he disappeared, called in every favor, emptied his accounts, and vanished to the farthest outpost he could find. Xylos, a failed mining colony with a decommissioned research station, perfect for someone who wanted to be forgotten by the universe. The long-range scanner in the communications room beeped, an unusual occurrence that immediately broke Kalen from his dark reminiscence. He frowned, moving to the antiquated console. The scanner was mostly ornamental at this point. He'd disabled the outgoing transmission capabilities years ago. Nothing should be triggering an alert. The display flickered with static before resolving into a frequency pattern he'd never seen before. Not natural interference, not standard communications. Something organic, pulsing, almost like a heartbeat, but with complex harmonic overtones that fluctuated in irregular patterns. Kalen's first instinct was to shut it down. Whatever it wasn't his concern. The last thing he wanted was to be found, to interact with anyone or anything. His finger hovered over the power switch. The signal flickered, weakened momentarily, then surged with a desperate intensity before fading again. Something about its erratic pulses triggered a response in him, a recognition of distress that bypassed his rational thought. "Damn it," he muttered, already regretting what he was about to do. He calibrated the scanner to triangulate the signal's origin. It was close, perhaps 10 kilometers to the north in the Obsidian Ravine. Too close to ignore, especially with the approaching magnetic storm. If it was a ship, anyone inside would be dead by morning once the storm hit full force. Kalen pulled his environmental suit from its storage locker, checking the oxygen reserves and integrity of the seals. The suit was patched in multiple places, but it would hold. He gathered emergency medical supplies, rations, and tools, secured them in a rucksack, and headed for the airlock. The terrain rover, another salvaged relic, protested as he brought its engines online. The magnetic interference was already affecting its systems, but Kalen knew exactly how to nurse the temperamental machine across the harsh landscape. If he hurried, he could reach the signal source, verify there was nothing requiring his intervention, and return before the storm made travel impossible. The journey was brutal. Twice he nearly lost control, navigating the steep slopes leading into the ravine. The iron-rich dust had formed into glass-sharp particulates that pelted the rover's exterior, threatening to breach the pressurized cabin. The signal grew stronger as he approached, pulsing with increasing urgency. Kalen finally spotted it, half buried in the rocky scree at the ravine's base. An escape pod, not of any design he recognized. Its sleek, iridescent hull was marred by scorch marks and what appeared to be precise, deliberate damage to the propulsion and communication systems. "This wasn't an accident," he murmured, examining the clean, surgical cuts to critical external components. Someone had wanted this pod to crash and its occupant to die. The entry hatch was partially obstructed by debris. Kalen cleared it with feverish efficiency, prying open the damaged mechanism with his tools. As the hatch finally yielded with a hiss of equalizing pressure, a wave of warm, humid air carrying unfamiliar scents rushed out. And then he saw her. The alien woman was slumped against the pod's interior wall, her breathing shallow and labored. Her skin was a luminescent pale blue, marked with intricate patterns that shifted subtly with each breath. Silver-white hair clung to her sweat-dampened face in tendrils. But what struck Kalen most was her abdomen, distended and contracting visibly beneath a torn garment. She was in labor. Her eyes fluttered open as he approached, startling violet irises with vertical pupils that contracted sharply at the sight of him. She tried to retreat further into the pod's interior, a keening sound of fear escaping her lips. "I'm not going to hurt you," Kalen said, keeping his movements slow, hands visible. "Your pod is damaged. There's a storm coming. You need medical attention." She didn't appear to understand his words, but something in his tone or demeanor must have registered. Her defensive posture softened slightly, though wariness remained etched in her features. She winced as another contraction visibly rippled across her abdomen. Kalen quickly assessed the pod systems. Life support was failing, temperatures dropping as power reserves dwindled. The navigation system had been completely wiped, not damaged, but deliberately purged of all data. Someone had erased any record of where this pod had come from or where it was going. Another contraction seized the woman, this one wringing a cry of pain from her. There was no time for hesitation or further investigation. Kalen needed to get her to the research station immediately. Communicating through gestures, he managed to convey his intention to move her. She resisted at first, then surrendered to necessity as another contraction left her gasping. With careful movements, Kalen helped her from the pod to the rover, securing her in the passenger seat. The return journey was exponentially more harrowing. The magnetic storm had advanced faster than anticipated, massive clouds of swirling dust reducing visibility to mere meters. The rover's navigation system failed completely, forcing Kalen to rely on instinct and memory to find his way back. Beside him, the alien woman's condition deteriorated rapidly. Her breathing became more irregular, her skin temperature dropping despite the rover's heating system. By the time they reached the research station, she was barely conscious. Kalen carried her through the airlock and directly to the station's medical bay, a room he'd avoided for years, filled with memories of his past life. Dust covered most surfaces, but the essential equipment remained functional. He laid her on the examination table, quickly activating the diagnostic scanner. The results were largely incomprehensible. Her physiology similar enough to human for basic assessment, but divergent in crucial ways. What was clear was that both she and the child were in critical distress. "Stay with me," Kalen urged, preparing what medications he dared use, uncertain of their effects on her alien biology. "You've made it this far. Just a little longer." Her eyes fixed on him with sudden clarity. She reached out, grasping his forearm with surprising strength, and pulled him closer. Words in an unknown language spilled from her lips with desperate intensity. "I don't understand," Kalen said, frustration mounting as he watched her life signs weaken further. "I want to help you, but I don't understand what you need." The woman's free hand moved to her abdomen. Another contraction rippled across it, and this time, Kalen saw something he'd missed before, a faint blue illumination beneath her skin, following the pattern of the contraction. Not a biological process, but something technological. Realization dawned. There's something interfering with the birth, he said, more to himself than to her. Something implanted. She seemed to sense his understanding, nodding weakly, her fingers digging into his arm. Kalen made a rapid decision. I need to perform an emergency procedure, he said, gathering surgical instruments. I was a bioengineer, not a doctor, but I'll do everything I can. The next 2 hours were the most intense of Kalen's life since the Chimera disaster. Working with inadequate equipment, minimal knowledge of her physiology, and the constant fear of killing both mother and child with a single mistake, he fought to save them. He discovered and disabled a bioelectronic device embedded in her uterine wall, a sophisticated piece of technology designed to trigger fatal hemorrhaging during childbirth. Someone really wanted you both dead, he murmured as he carefully extracted the lethal device. What could possibly justify this? The birth itself, once the device was removed, progressed with astonishing speed. The alien woman's resilience was remarkable. She remained conscious throughout, her violet eyes fixed on Kalen with an intensity that communicated more than words ever could: determination, fear, and desperate hope. When the child finally emerged, tiny, with skin a paler blue than its mother's and tufts of iridescent white hair, the silence in the medical bay was deafening. Kalen held his breath, exhaustion momentarily forgotten as he cleaned the infant's airways and checked for vital signs. The baby's first cry was unlike any human infant's, a melodic trill that resonated through the medical bay, causing the lights to flicker briefly. The mother reached out with trembling hands, and Kalen placed the swaddled newborn in her arms. The look of wonder and relief on her face transcended any language barrier. "You did it," Kalen said, allowing himself a moment of genuine pride as he monitored their vital signs, both now stabilizing. "You both survived." But as the adrenaline of the emergency faded, reality reasserted itself. He had saved them, yes, but for what? They were stranded on a hostile planet with dwindling resources in a dilapidated research station never meant for long-term habitation. And someone, somewhere, had gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure neither mother nor child survived. For the first time in 6 years, Kalen Frost was responsible for lives other than his own. The realization terrified him more than any magnetic storm ever could. The first days following the birth established a fragile routine. Kalen converted a storage room adjacent to his quarters into a makeshift living space for the mother and child. He provided food, nutrient packs rehydrated with purified water, unsure if they would be compatible with her physiology. To his relief, she was able to consume them, though she approached each offering with initial suspicion, waiting until he demonstrated their safety by eating first. The child, whom Kalen mentally designated Kale after hearing the mother use a similar-sounding vocalization when cradling him, was thriving despite the circumstances. His skin had a luminescent quality that intensified when he was agitated or hungry, and his cries continued to cause curious electromagnetic fluctuations in nearby equipment. The mother remained vigilant, never allowing Kalen to approach without tracking his every movement, positioning herself between him and the child at the slightest unexpected sound. She slept in short intervals, always with the baby secured against her chest. When Kalen entered the room, her vertical pupils would dilate instantly, body tensing for potential flight or confrontation. Kalen respected her boundaries, maintaining distance except when medical necessity required closer interaction. He found himself speaking aloud more than he had in years, narrating his actions before performing them, explaining the station's systems and the harsh realities of Xylos. Whether she understood his words or simply his tone, the continuous stream of calm communication seemed to gradually ease her apprehension. "The atmospheric scrubbers are operating at 70% capacity," he explained while adjusting a control panel near her quarters. "Not ideal, but we'll manage. The magnetic storms interfere with the filtration systems. Another legacy of this planet's charming hospitality." He paused, watching as she cradled the infant while observing him with that unwavering violet gaze. "I still don't know your name," he said, tapping his chest. "I'm Kaylin." She tilted her head slightly, considering, then freed one hand from the baby to touch her own chest. "Lyra," she said, the word musical in her distinctive voice. "Lyra," Kaylin repeated, a small smile forming, his first in years. "And the little one?" She looked down at her child, her expression softening in a way that required no translation. "Kale," she confirmed, unknowingly validating Kaylin's private designation. This first linguistic exchange, simple as it was, marked a turning point. That night, for the first time since their arrival, Kaylin dreamed not of the faces of the dead colleagues who typically haunted his sleep, but of swirling lights in impossible colors, reminiscent of Lyra's shifting skin patterns. He woke disoriented, heart racing, but not with the usual terror. Something else had disturbed his sleep, a sound. He lay still, listening, then heard it again, Lyra's voice, raised in what could only be described as a lullaby. The melody was unlike anything Kaylin had heard before, with harmonic layers that seemed almost mathematical in precision. Without conscious thought, he found himself drawn to the doorway of their quarters. Lyra sat cross-legged on her sleeping mat, Kale cradled in her arms, her skin illuminated with patterns that pulsed in rhythm with her song. For a moment, the scene was so intimate, so outside his experience of the past 6 years, that Kaylin felt like an intruder in his own station. He turned to leave, but the floor panel beneath his foot creaked. Lyra's head snapped up, song cutting off abruptly, her body immediately tensing into its defensive posture. "I'm sorry," Kaylin said quickly. "I heard. It was beautiful." Lyra's expression remained guarded, but she didn't retreat further. After a long moment, she inclined her head slightly in what might have been acknowledgement. "The storm damaged the eastern shield array," Kaylin continued, falling back on practical matters. "I'll need to make repairs tomorrow. We'll be fine for now," but he stopped, realizing he was rambling. "Good night, Lyra." "Good night, Kale." As he turned away, Lyra's voice followed him, soft but clear. "Good night, Kaylin." He froze, then continued to his quarters without looking back, emotions he'd thought long buried stirring uncomfortably in his chest. The following week brought a catastrophic failure in the atmospheric recycling system, a key component finally surrendering to years of makeshift repairs and the corrosive Xylos environment. Kaylin worked frantically to bypass the damaged section, aware that without functioning scrubbers, the station's air would become toxic within days. "Hand me the molecular bonding tool," he said automatically as he lay half inside an access panel, forgetting momentarily that he was alone in his repair work, as he always had been. To his shock, the tool was placed in his outstretched hand. Kaylin shifted to look up. Lyra stood beside him, Kale secured to her chest with a sling fashioned from spare fabric. Her expression remained cautious, but she had identified the correct tool from his scattered equipment and chosen to help. "Thank you," he said, momentarily stunned by this unexpected assistance. Lyra nodded, then pointed to the exposed circuitry. "Broken," she said, the word heavily accented but understandable. "Yes," Kaylin confirmed. "Very broken. Very dangerous if not fixed." He returned to his work, but with a new awareness of Lyra watching intently, studying his methods. When he needed another component, she anticipated the need, selecting it before he asked. They worked in this manner for hours, establishing a wordless rhythm that gradually bridged the gulf of suspicion between them. When the system finally hummed back to life, purified air flowing once more through the station's vents, Kaylin emerged from the access panel exhausted but satisfied. He found Lyra examining the station's environmental control displays, Kale asleep against her chest. "You understand these systems," Kaylin observed. Lyra's fingers traced the airflow diagram on the screen. "Similar," she said carefully. "On ship." It was the first reference she'd made to her origins. Kaylin hesitated, then decided to press gently. "The ship you escaped from?" Her expression darkened, the luminescent patterns on her skin shifting to deeper hues. "Bad place. Not ship 4. Travel. Ship 4." She struggled for the word, then placed a hand on her abdomen, where the bioelectronic device had been implanted. Experimentation, Kalen supplied, a chill running through him. They were experimenting on you? Lyra nodded slowly. On many like Lyra. She gestured to Kale. Make special children. Then, she drew a finger across her throat in a universal gesture. They wanted to kill you both, Kalen said, the pieces falling into place. That's why they sabotaged your escape pod after you managed to flee. Yes, Lyra confirmed. Kale, different. Too different. They fear. Kalen thought of the electromagnetic disturbances that accompanied the child's cries, the unusual luminescence of his skin. What can he do? What makes him so special they'd want him dead? Lyra's expression grew guarded again. Not yet safe to tell, she said after a long pause. Not from you, she added, seeing Kalen's hurt expression. From them. They still search, still listen. She tapped her temple significantly. The implication was clear. Some form of tracking or surveillance might still be active, possibly implanted like the lethal device Kalen had removed. The thought sent a surge of protective anger through him, surprising in its intensity. No one's going to hurt either of you, he said firmly. Not while I'm here. Lyra studied his face with those penetrating violet eyes. Why you help? She asked finally. Why alone here? What? She gestured around at the dilapidated station. Hide? The question hit Kalen like a physical blow. For 6 years, he'd replayed his failures daily, wearing his guilt like armor against the possibility of human connection. Now this alien woman, herself traumatized and hunted, was asking him to justify his self-imposed exile. I kill people, he said bluntly. Not intentionally, but through arrogance. Through believing I knew better than established protocols. He sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted beyond the physical. I was developing a method to accelerate cellular regeneration, to help heal catastrophic injuries. The process involved genetically modified microorganisms that would target damaged tissue. Kalen ran a hand over his face, the memories sharp as ever. Something went wrong during the final testing phase. The microorganisms mutated, became aggressive. The containment system failed. 17 people died, colleagues, friends, people who trusted me. Lyra listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. The official investigation cleared me of legal responsibility, Kalen continued. Equipment malfunction, they said, but I designed that equipment. I insisted we proceed despite anomalous readings in preliminary tests. Their deaths are on me. He expected judgment or fear from Lyra, the natural response to learning one shared confined quarters with someone responsible for multiple deaths. Instead, after a long silence, she simply asked, You try to save them? Of course, Kalen said. I tried everything. By the time emergency protocols allowed safe entry to the contaminated area, it was too late. Lyra nodded slowly. Them, she said, gesturing in the direction of the medical bay where he had saved her and Kale. You save. The simple observation struck Kalen speechless. He had indeed saved them, acting on instinct and compassion when it would have been far easier and safer to ignore the distress signal and remain in isolation. That doesn't balance the scales, he said finally. No, Lyra agreed, but shows truth of heart. Before Kalen could respond, the station's long-range scanner emitted a shrill alert, the same system that had detected Lyra's pod days earlier. His blood ran cold as he rushed to the communications room, Lyra following close behind. The scanner display showed an unidentified object approaching Xylos at high velocity, too small for a standard vessel, but larger than an escape pod. The trajectory indicated a controlled approach, not the haphazard path of debris or a damaged craft. They found us, Lyra whispered, clutching Kale tighter as his skin began to glow in response to her distress. Maybe not, Kalen said, though he didn't believe it. It could be automated, a probe of some kind. The mining corporation still sends occasional survey equipment to assess resource potential. But as he adjusted the scanner parameters, the object's signature became clearer, a distinctive energy profile unlike standard mining equipment. It's from the same people who sent your pod, he confirmed grimly. The propulsion system has identical characteristics. Fear and determination warred on Lyra's face. We must leave. There's nowhere to go, Kalen reminded her gently. No functioning ships at this station, and nowhere on Xylos to hide that sensors wouldn't detect. He studied the approaching craft's trajectory and speed. We have maybe 20 hours before it reaches orbit. Then we fight, Lyra said with sudden fierceness. I not let them take Kale. Kalen was already formulating options, his mind racing through the station's limited resources. The magnetic storms, he said slowly. They interfere with scanning technology, especially the precise sensors needed to detect life signs. If we can amplify that interference. Make on storm, Lyra suggested, catching on quickly. Not exactly, but we can use the station's shield generators to create an electromagnetic pulse similar to the storm's effects. It won't destroy their probe, but it might blind it long enough to make them believe the pod's crash was fatal. They spent the next 18 hours in frantic preparation. Kalen reconfigured the shield generators while Lyra, proving remarkably adept with the station's systems now that trust had been established, helped modify the power distribution network to channel energy where it would be needed. Kale, sensing the tension, was unusually agitated. His cries caused increasingly severe fluctuations in nearby equipment. Lights flickering, displays glitching, small power surges disrupting delicate calibrations. His abilities are growing stronger, Kalen observed after a particularly intense, crying episode caused an entire section of lights to burn out. Lyra nodded, a mix of pride and concern in her expression as she soothed the infant. Why they fear him? Why they want? She didn't complete the sentence. What exactly can he do? Kalen asked again, feeling they needed all available information to survive the coming confrontation. Lyra hesitated, then made a decision. Kale connect with technology. Not just affect, join. Become. They make him this way, then fear result. He can interface directly with technological systems? Mentally, Kalen asked, stunned by the implications. Yes. When older, much more. Direct neural connection to any system. Perfect merger of organic and technology. Lyra's expression darkened. They create perfect weapon, perfect spy, perfect tool. Then discover cannot control, cannot limit. So decide destroy. Kalen looked at the infant with new understanding. No wonder Lyra's captors had gone to such lengths to eliminate them. A being with Kale's potential abilities could access any secure system, control any network technology, potentially even transfer consciousness between technological platforms. The military and intelligence applications were staggering. However, the threats such abilities would pose to those who had created him, should Kale ever turn against them. How do you know what he'll be capable of? Kalen asked. He's just an infant. Others before, Lyra said grimly. Older specimens. I see tests. See. Results. She stroked Kale's iridescent hair. All others destroyed when control failed. Kale asked. Most advanced. The stakes suddenly became even clearer. They weren't just fighting for the lives of Lyra and her child, but potentially against forces that would not stop pursuing such a valuable and dangerous asset. As the probe entered Xylos' upper atmosphere, Kalen and Lyra took their positions. They had converted the station's shield generators into a massive electromagnetic pulse generator, designed to create localized disruptions that would confuse the probe's sensors and potentially damage its navigation systems. Ready? Kalen asked, hand poised over the activation control. Lyra nodded, cradling Kale protectively. The infant was unusually calm now, his luminescent skin pulsing with a steady rhythm that seemed synchronized with the station's power grid. Kalen initiated the pulse sequence. The lights throughout the station dimmed as power was diverted to the modified shield generators. Elohim built rapidly to a high-pitched whine. The air itself seemed to vibrate with gathering energy. Brace yourself, Kalen warned moments before engaging the final stage. The release of energy was more violent than anticipated. The electromagnetic pulse exploded outward from the station in visible ripples of blue-white light. Every system momentarily went dark before emergency power engaged. Through the viewport, They watched as the atmospheric disturbance reached the descending probe. The effect was immediate. The probe's controlled descent faltered, its trajectory becoming erratic. It veered sharply eastward, then appeared to lose propulsion entirely, tumbling through the atmosphere. "It's working," Kalen said, watching as the probe's signature on the scanner weakened and distorted. They can't maintain control. But their triumph was premature. As the probe continued its chaotic descent, it stabilized briefly, long enough to launch a smaller object that separated and continued toward the station with alarming precision. Secondary probe, Lyra, identified with dismay, hardened against interference. The smaller device approached rapidly, evidently designed to function even under extreme electromagnetic conditions. It hovered above the station, emitting a scanning beam that penetrated the facility's superstructure. "It's looking for life signs," Kalen said, watching the scanner's readout of the probe's activities, "specifically for your biosignature and Kale's." Lyra's expression hardened with determination. "Distracted? I have idea." Before Kalen could question her, Lyra placed Kale in his arms and moved to the station's main environmental control console. With swift, certain movements, she began inputting commands, rerouting power in patterns Kalen didn't immediately recognize. "What are you doing?" he asked, supporting the surprisingly calm infant. "Creating false signatures," Lyra explained without pausing her work. "Duplicating our life patterns, projecting throughout station." Confused probe. As she worked, Kale's skin began to glow with increasing intensity. The infant seemed focused on the console, his tiny hands reaching toward it. Where his skin made contact with Kalen's, a tingling sensation spread, like mild electrical current flowing between them. Suddenly, every display in the control room illuminated simultaneously. Systems that had been dormant for years came online. The station hummed with renewed energy as Kale established a connection between Lyra's commands and the station's deepest operating protocols. "He's helping you," Kalen realized, watching in awe as the infant's eyes reflected scrolling data. "Yes," Lyra confirmed, "working even faster now. First time doing this. Not control, just opening paths. Making easier." Outside, the secondary probe's scanning pattern became increasingly erratic as it detected conflicting life signatures. It moved from one section of the station to another, unable to lock onto specific targets amidst the phantom readings Lyra had created. "It's working," Kalen said, hope rising. The probe can't distinguish between the real and false signatures. But then something unexpected happened. The probe abruptly ceased its scanning and hovered motionless above the station. A moment later, it emitted a signal, not directed at them, but outward toward space. "It's calling for reinforcements," Kalen realized with dread. "It can't complete its mission alone, so it's reporting back." Lyra's hands paused on the console. "How long before others come?" Kalen calculated rapidly. "Based on the nearest major transit routes, at least 4 days. Maybe longer with Xylos's isolation." Their eyes met across the control room, the same thought occurring to both. They had bought time, but not victory. Whatever forces had sent the probe would not abandon their pursuit, especially now that they had confirmation Lyra and Kale had survived. "We need a more permanent solution," Kalen said firmly. "We need to convince them you're both dead." Lyra tilted her head questioningly. "Ow!" Kalen looked down at Kale, still connected to the station's systems through some inexplicable neural interface. With his help, he said, a plan forming. "We're going to send a message of our own." Over the next hours, they crafted their deception. Using the station's communication array, enhanced by Kale's unique abilities, they prepared a falsified data package, complete with manufactured medical telemetry showing Lyra and Kale's life signs failing, corrupted surveillance footage of their supposed final moments, and system logs documenting environmental contamination that ostensibly claimed their lives. "Will they believe?" Lyra asked as they prepared to transmit their elaborately constructed lie. "They'll want to," Kalen said. "It's easier than mounting a full expedition to Xylos. The important thing is to give them just enough convincing evidence to close their file on you both." The transmission was sent directly to the waiting probe, which accepted the data package and, after a brief analysis, retracted its scanning equipment and began ascending back toward orbit, presumably to rendezvous with its damaged parent craft. They watched in tense silence as both probes eventually left Xylos's atmosphere, their signatures fading from the long-range scanner. "Is it over?" Lyra asked softly. "For now," Kalen replied, unwilling to offer false certainty. "They may send other probes, eventually, but we've bought ourselves time. Time to prepare, to strengthen our defenses, to—" He trailed off, suddenly conscious of the implication of permanence in his words. Lyra completed the thought. To make home here. The word home hung in the air between them, a concept foreign to both for different reasons. For Kalen, home had been sacrificed when he chose exile. For Lyra, it appeared home had never truly existed. "Yes," he agreed finally, "to make a home here. For all of us." In the months that followed, the station underwent a transformation. Areas that had been allowed to deteriorate during Kalen's solitary years were restored to functionality. The hydroponics bay, once used only to grow basic nutritional supplements, was expanded to cultivate a variety of plants, some native to Xylos that Kalen had collected during rare expeditions, others grown from long-stored seed banks in the station's laboratory. Lyra proved to be an intuitive engineer, adapting quickly to the station's systems and often suggesting improvements Kalen hadn't considered. She revealed that before her capture and forced participation in the breeding program, she had been a systems technician on her home world, a planet she spoke of rarely and with quiet grief. Kale grew at an astonishing rate. By 6 months, he was already achieving developmental milestones that would have been remarkable in a human toddler twice his age. His connection to technology strengthened, becoming more controlled and specific. He could activate systems with a touch, diagnose malfunctions by simply being near equipment, and seemed to understand complex technological principles instinctively. His first word wasn't mother or father, but system, pronounced with perfect clarity while touching a climate control panel. Lyra and Kalen had exchanged looks of amazement and concern. The child was extraordinary, yes, but his very uniqueness was what had made him a target. "We must teach him caution," Lyra said as they watched Kale sleep that night. "His abilities? Dangerous for him. For us. We will," Kalen promised. "But we'll also teach him that he's not just a weapon or a tool. That he's a child first. Our child." The words slipped out before he could consider their implications. Our child. Somewhere in the months of shared danger, shared work, shared meals, and quiet evenings, Kalen had stopped thinking of himself as Kale's rescuer and begun thinking of himself as something else. Entirely. Lyra's luminescent skin patterns shifted to a hue he had come to recognize as emotional intensity. "Our child," she repeated softly, testing the phrase. Kalen met her gaze, violet eyes that had once been foreign and unsettling now as familiar as his own reflection. If that's acceptable to you," he said uncertainly. In answer, Lyra moved closer, her hand finding his. The touch sent a current between them. Not just the physical electricity that came from her unique biology, but something deeper, more fundamental. A connection forged through survival, trust, and shared purpose. "Our family," she corrected gently, her free hand resting on Kale's sleeping form. "Not just child. Family." Kalen's throat tightened with emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "Family," he agreed, the word simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. Their new reality settled into place around this acknowledgement. The research station, once Kalen's self-imposed prison, became truly a home. They established routines and traditions, creating a sense of normalcy despite their extraordinary circumstances. 1 year to the day after Lyra's arrival, they held a small celebration in the hydroponics bay, now lush with vegetation. Kale, thriving and precocious, delighted in the colored lights Kalen had rigged from salvaged components. The child's laughter, still carrying that musical quality that affected nearby electronics, echoed through chambers that had known only silence for so long. "He happy here," Lyra observed, watching Kale interact with a primitive robot Kalen had constructed as a companion and teaching tool. The device responded to Kale's touch with patterns of light and sound that made the child giggle with delight. "Are you?" Kalen asked, the question emerging before he could reconsider. Lyra was silent for a moment, her luminescent skin patterns shifting thoughtfully. "I miss stars of home," she said finally. "Miss lakes of light. But there." She made a gesture he'd come to recognize as indicating confinement or restriction. "Not free. Here." She looked around at their created sanctuary, at Kale playing safely, at Kalen himself. "Here is freedom. Here is peace." The moment was interrupted by an alert from the long-range scanner, the first since the probe's departure months earlier. Kalen and Lyra exchanged alarmed glances before rushing to the communications room. Kale gathered protectively in Lyra's arms. The scanner showed a vessel approaching Xylos, larger than the probe, but still relatively small. Its trajectory suggested deliberate navigation rather than automated patterns. "Could it be them?" Lyra asked, fear evident in her voice. "Could they have sent more?" Kalen studied the readings with growing concern. "The signature doesn't match their technology, but that doesn't mean much. They could be using different equipment to avoid detection." They enacted their contingency plan, one developed during long nights of preparation for this very possibility. Critical systems were shut down to minimize detectable energy signatures. The station's thermal profile was reduced to match the surrounding terrain. And most importantly, Kale was placed in a specially constructed chamber deep within the station's core, insulated against scanning technology and designed to mask his unique bioelectrical signature. "I stay with him," Lyra insisted as they prepared the chamber. "You monitor ship." Kalen hesitated, reluctant to separate, but nodded in agreement. "I'll observe only. No communication, no defensive measures unless absolutely necessary. If it's a random survey vessel, they'll likely move on without investigating a supposedly abandoned outpost." He kissed Kale's forehead and squeezed Lyra's hand before sealing them safely in the chamber. As he returned to the monitoring station, Kalen was struck by how completely his priorities had shifted. The man who had once sought isolation as punishment now faced his greatest fear, losing the family he had unexpectedly found. The approaching vessel entered Xylos' atmosphere with a trajectory that immediately raised Kalen's suspicions. Rather than conducting a standard survey pattern, it headed directly toward the research station's coordinates. Whoever was piloting knew exactly where they were going. Kalen activated the station's passive defenses, measures that wouldn't be detected as aggressive, but would provide some protection if needed. His hand hovered over the communication system, torn between maintaining silence and attempting to ascertain the visitor's intentions. Before he could decide, the vessel landed less than a kilometer from the station. Its design was unfamiliar, sleek, and clearly built for stealth rather than cargo or passenger transport. A single figure emerged from the craft, encased in an environmental suit appropriate for Xylos' harsh conditions. Through the surveillance system, Kalen watched the visitor approach the station's main airlock. There was something familiar about their movements, a confidence that suggested knowledge of the facility. The figure paused at the external access panel, inputting a sequence that Kalen recognized with shock, an old emergency override code that shouldn't have been known to anyone outside the original research team. His blood ran cold. Only someone from his past would know that code. Someone connected to the Chimera disaster. Kalen moved swiftly to the airlock, sealing the interior bulkheads to protect Lyra and Kale's location deeper within the station. He activated the internal communication system. "Lyra, someone's entering the station. Someone who knows the security protocols. Stay hidden until I confirm they're not a threat." He collected a pulse weapon from the security locker, another relic he'd never thought he'd need, and positioned himself to confront the visitor as they completed the airlock cycle. As the inner door prepared to open, Kalen steeled himself for a confrontation he'd never anticipated. The figure removed their helmet as the atmosphere normalized, revealing a face Kalen had seen countless times in his nightmares. Dr. Miranda Shaw, one of the 17 colleagues he believed had died in the Chimera incident. Her dark hair was now streaked with silver, her face more lined than he remembered, but unmistakably her. "Hello, Kalen," she said calmly, as if they'd parted ways only yesterday. "You're a difficult man to find when you don't want to be found." Kalen stared in disbelief, the weapon lowering slightly in his shock. "Miranda? How? You died. Everyone died. I saw the facility after sterilization. Nothing could have survived." Miranda's expression hardened slightly. "Not everyone died. Some of us were preserved by the very pathogen you created. Changed, but still alive. Still conscious through the containment procedures that should have killed us." "That's not possible," Kalen whispered, though he was beginning to understand with mounting horror. The Chimera pathogen had been designed to accelerate cellular regeneration, to create resilience in damaged tissue. If it had mutated in unexpected ways, the official report declared us dead because that was easier than explaining what we'd become, Miranda continued, removing her gloves to reveal hands that seemed to shimmer subtly beneath the skin, not unlike Lyra's luminescent patterns. 17 test subjects with unprecedented cellular adaptation and regenerative capabilities. Quite the military asset, once they figured out how to control us. Kalen's mind raced. "You've been working for them? All this time?" "Not willingly, at first," Miranda clarified. "But one adapts to survive, Kalen. Something you understand quite well, judging by your setup here." Her gaze traveled around the repurposed station. "Though I must say, you've made some interesting modifications recently. Modifications that caught attention when your little electromagnetic pulse disrupted one of our monitoring satellites." Kalen repeated, try to process the implications. "The organization that took control of Chimera survivors. The same organization that's been developing other biological assets with unique capabilities." Miranda's expression became knowing. "Assets like the female alien and her hybrid child you've been harboring." Kalen raised the weapon again, resolve hardening. "You're here for Lyra and Kale." "I'm here to warn you," Miranda corrected. "I managed to intercept the probe's data package. Very clever, forging medical telemetry to fake their deaths. It bought you time, but not as much as you think. The deception didn't fool everyone, and a retrieval team is being assembled. I came ahead because..." She hesitated, something like regret crossing her features. "Because I owed you that much, at least." "Owed me?" Kalen repeated incredulously. "I thought I killed you. I've lived with that guilt for 6 years. And that guilt nearly destroyed you," Miranda observed. "As it was meant to. Your exile wasn't just self-imposed, Kalen. It was engineered. The investigation that cleared you while suggesting your culpability. The convenient availability of this remote outpost. You were being contained. A brilliant mind that created something too valuable to eliminate, but too dangerous to allow continued work elsewhere." The revelation struck Kalen like a physical blow. He had believed his exile was penance. Instead, it had been another form of imprisonment, one he had willingly accepted. "You never questioned why a state-of-the-art research station would be simply abandoned?" Miranda asked. "It was waiting for you, Kalen, monitoring your psychological deterioration while keeping you isolated from anyone who might benefit from your knowledge. Until Lyra's pod crashed," Kalen realized, "and I interfered with their plans for her and Kale." "Precisely," Miranda confirmed. "Two separate containment operations. Suddenly intersected. I doubt either division knew about the other's asset until your activities triggered multiple alerts." "How long do we have?" 3 days, perhaps 4. The retrieval team is being assembled with specific countermeasures for both your biologics work and the child's unique capabilities." Kalen's mind raced through options, each more desperate than the last. "Why are you helping us? If you're working for them?" "Because the child represents a possibility I haven't had in 6 years," Miranda interrupted, her composure finally cracking to reveal genuine emotion. "Freedom." His neural interface abilities could potentially counteract the control mechanisms they've integrated into my modified biology, into all of us survivors. Before Kalen could respond, a voice came from behind him. "I can help you." He turned to find Lyra standing in the corridor, Kale in her arms. Despite his instructions to stay hidden, she had emerged, perhaps sensing through some maternal instinct that this confrontation was pivotal to their future. Miranda's eyes widened slightly at the sight of him. "You're offering to help me? After what my organization did to you?" "Not organization," Lyra corrected. "People. Some people hurt. Some help." She looked pointedly at Miranda. "You choose help now." Cale squirmed in Lyra's arms, his attention fixed on Miranda with unusual intensity. His small hand reached toward her, fingers splayed, as if sensing something invisible to the others. "He recognizes the modifications in your cellular structure," Kalen realized. "The technological interfaces they've implanted to control the chimera pathogen in your system." Miranda nodded slowly. "Quite remarkable." The reports indicated advanced perception, but to detect the control mechanisms at his age. "He do more than detect," Lyra said with quiet pride. "He connect. He change if needed." A fragile hope dawned on Miranda's face. "You would allow him to attempt this? After everything?" "Suffering not erased by more suffering," Lyra said simply. "Freedom for all, or freedom for none." Kalen moved to Lyra's side, united in this decision despite his lingering shock at Miranda's appearance. "We'll help you if you help us escape before the retrieval team arrives. All of us, together." The next 72 hours were a frenzy of preparation, planning, and unprecedented collaboration. Miranda's ship, a stealth scout vessel with advanced navigation and cloaking capabilities, became their means of escape. While too small for comfortable long-term habitation, it could carry them to a neutral outpost where they might arrange more suitable transport to truly disappear. Kalen and Lyra worked tirelessly to gather essential supplies and equipment, particularly items needed for Kale's continued development and the management of his abilities. Meanwhile, Miranda used her access codes to create false intelligence, suggesting the station had been abandoned, leaving automated systems to create the impression of continued habitation while masking their actual departure. The most delicate task fell to Kale. Under Lyra's guidance, the child formed a neural connection with Miranda, his developing abilities allowing him to identify and temporarily suppress the control mechanisms embedded in her modified biology. The process was clearly taxing for the infant, leaving him exhausted and unusually subdued, but each session showed promising results. Miranda reported increasing periods of genuine autonomy, the first she'd experienced since the Chimera incident. On the final night before their planned departure, as Kale slept soundly after another session with Miranda, Kalen found Lyra in the hydroponics bay. She was carefully collecting samples from the plants they had nurtured together, preserving what little of their temporary home they could take with them. "You should rest," Kalen said gently. "Tomorrow will be challenging." Lyra continued her meticulous work. "These plants, our first creation together. Symbol of life we built from nothing." Kalen moved beside her, assisting with the careful extraction of seedlings. "We'll plant them wherever we settle next." A reminder of Xylos. "Not just reminder of place," Lyra corrected. "Reminder of beginning, of choice to trust, to help stranger, to become family." She looked up at him, her violet eyes reflecting the soft illumination of her skin patterns. "Many would have left me in pod to die. I couldn't," Kalen said simply. "Not once I saw you. Not once I understood." Lyra set aside her collected specimens and turned fully toward him. "When I first woke here, saw you, I thought end had come. Thought you were like others who hurt, who experiment, who control." Her luminescent patterns shifted to a deep, resonant blue he had come to associate with her most profound emotions. "Instead, you gave life, gave freedom, gave—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Gave love." The word hung between them, acknowledged but never before directly expressed. Their relationship had evolved organically from wary cooperation to mutual respect to genuine affection. But the circumstances of their forced cohabitation had always left an unspoken question about the nature of their bond. Would they have chosen each other without the crucible of survival? "I love you," Kalen confirmed, the admission easier than he'd expected. "I think I began to love you watching you fight to protect Kale, even when you barely had strength to stay conscious." I knew I loved you when I realized I was no longer afraid of failing you, only of losing you. Lyra's expression softened. In my language, we say souls find truth in darkest night. Darkness brought us together, but light. She gestured toward the hydroponics bay, lush with growth, light we created ourselves. Their foreheads touched gently, an intimate gesture that had become their alternative to the human kiss. Lyra's facial structure and sensitivity making traditional kisses uncomfortable. The contact completed a circuit between them, Lyra's natural bioelectricity harmonizing with Kalen's human physiology in a way that created a pleasant, warm current. Whatever happens tomorrow, Kalen promised, we face it together, as a family. The morning brought unexpected complications. Miranda detected encrypted communications suggesting the retrieval team had accelerated their timeline. They would reach Xylos within hours, not days as originally estimated. We need to leave immediately, she urged, already initiating pre-flight procedures on her vessel. They've deployed advanced scanning drones to establish a perimeter. Once those are in position, even my ship's stealth capabilities won't guarantee our escape. They abandoned their carefully measured packing plans, taking only the most critical supplies and equipment. As Kalen secured the last essential container in the ship's small cargo hold, an alarm sounded from the communications room. The station's long-range scanner had detected multiple incoming vessels, significantly larger than Miranda's scout ship and moving with military precision. They're already here, Kalen realized with dread. They must have had assets closer than Miranda thought. Final preparations complete, Lyra reported, emerging from the ship with Kale secured in a carrier against her chest. Engine ready, cloak functional. Miranda appeared behind them, her expression grim. There's a problem. The cloak won't sustain all of us with the equipment we've loaded. Too much mass, too many distinct biosignatures. They'll detect the anomaly immediately. Then we lighten the load, Kalen decided, already moving to the cargo hold to offload non-essential items. It's not enough, Miranda said, stopping him with a hand on his arm. The calculations are clear. Even with minimal equipment, they'll detect 4 biosignatures under cloak at close range. The implication hung heavy in the air. Someone would need to stay behind, to create a diversion, to buy time for the others to escape. I'll do it, Kalen said without hesitation. I can trigger the station's emergency protocols, create a system overload that will mask your departure and delay pursuit. No, Lyra protested immediately, clutching Kale tighter. We stay together. Family. Lyra's right. Miranda interjected. It should be me. I still have active access codes. I can feed false information directly into their tactical systems, create confusion about your location. And, she hesitated, I'm still connected to their control network. If captured, I can't guarantee I won't be used against you. All the more reason for you to come with us, Kalen argued. Kale was making progress with the control mechanisms. Partial progress, Miranda corrected. Temporary suppression at best. The child needs more time, more development before he could permanently neutralize what they've built into me. Her expression softened with resolve. This is my choice, Kalen. Perhaps the first truly free choice I've made in 6 years. The distant rumble of approaching vessels made further debate impossible. Miranda pressed a data chip into Kalen's hand. Coordinates to a safe harbor. People who can help you truly disappear. Now go, all of you. The farewell was brief by necessity. As Miranda headed toward the communications center to begin her diversion, Lyra stopped her with a gentle touch. No words were exchanged, but something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of shared experience despite their different origins. Both had been used as biological assets, their bodies modified without consent, their autonomy violated. Both had found strength to reclaim themselves. Moments later, Miranda's scout vessel slipped away from the research station, cloaking field engaged, carrying Kalen, Lyra, and Kale toward an uncertain future. Through the view screen, they watched as the station's systems executed the programmed diversion. Power surges, radiation spikes, and finally a controlled detonation of the primary generator that would create enough electromagnetic interference to cover their escape. As Xylos receded behind them, Kalen felt a complex mixture of emotions. The planet had been his prison, then his sanctuary, then his home. He had arrived broken and alone, believing himself responsible for 17 deaths. He departed whole, with family, knowing at least one of those deaths had been fabricated, and wondering how many other aspects of his past might have been manipulated. She survived, Lyra asked softly, watching the distant flashes of the retrieval team securing the damaged station. Miranda's smart, and she knows their protocols, Kalen said, hoping it was true. If anyone could convince them she was still a loyal asset while concealing her role in our escape, it's her. Kale made a soft, trilling sound, his small hand pressed against the view screen as if reaching back toward the planet they were leaving. His skin glowed with gentle pulses of light that made the ship's instrumentation flutter momentarily. He connected with her, Lyra explained, watching her son's reaction. Created bond during healing sessions. He feels her still, alive. The news brought Kalen a measure of comfort. If Kale could sense Miranda's continued existence, perhaps someday they might find a way to help her achieve true freedom as well. But for now, their priority had to be establishing a new life far from the reach of those who would exploit Kale's abilities or Lyra's biology. The coordinates Miranda had provided led them to a small trading outpost on the fringes of settled space, the kind of place where questions weren't asked and documentation was flexible. There, using the limited resources they had brought and Miranda's access credentials, they were able to arrange passage on a colony ship headed toward the outer territories. Their cabin was cramped, the journey long and occasionally uncomfortable, but compared to the hardships they had already endured, such challenges seemed trivial. They established new identities, careful to mask the unique aspects of Lyra and Kale's biology with cosmetic adaptations and cautious behavior. Kale learned to control his technological interactions, to appear as an ordinary, if precocious, child. 6 months after leaving Xylos, they arrived at their destination, a newly established settlement on a planet with environmental conditions remarkably similar to Lyra's homeworld. The colony welcomed them without undue scrutiny, grateful for Kalen's engineering skills and Lyra's technological expertise. They built a home at the settlement's edge, near a small lake that reflected the planet's twin moons in a way that reminded Lyra of the lakes of light she had described from her past. In the garden, they planted the seedlings from Xylos, which thrived in their new environment, hardy survivors like the family that had nurtured them. Kale grew quickly, his abilities developing under the careful guidance of both parents. They taught him caution without instilling fear, emphasizing that his uniqueness was a gift but also a responsibility. On the rare occasions when planetary communication systems experienced unexplained maintenance improvements or colony security measures detected and neutralized potential threats before they materialized, Kalen and Lyra exchanged knowing glances but asked no questions of their son. Years passed in relative peace. They remained vigilant but refused to live in constant fear. They had chosen this remote colony precisely because it existed beyond the immediate reach of the organizations that had controlled their past lives. Here, they were simply a family, unusual in some respects, but accepted as part of the diverse tapestry of colonists seeking new beginnings. On the 5th anniversary of their arrival at the colony, they held a small celebration in their garden, now lush with both Xylos transplants and native species. Kale, now looking like a child of about 10 despite being chronologically younger, had prepared a special surprise, a communication device of his own design. "What does it do?" Kalen asked, examining the elegant construction with pride in his son's ingenuity. "It listens," Kale explained, his voice carrying the slight musical quality inherited from Lyra, "to specific frequencies, to specific patterns." He activated the device, which emitted a soft, pulsing glow reminiscent of Lyra's skin patterns. "To people like us, people who might need help, like we did." Lyra and Kalen exchanged glances, understanding immediately. Despite their efforts to protect him from the harsher realities of their past, Kale had intuited much about his origins and the danger that had pursued his family. Rather than fostering resentment or fear, these realizations had nurtured in him a profound empathy and sense of purpose. "You want to help others escape," Kalen said softly. "Others being used as you and your mother were meant to be used." Kale nodded, unusually solemn. "There are more out there. I can feel them sometimes when I connect deeply with bigger systems. Others being modified, controlled. Some voluntarily, most not." He looked up at his parents with determination beyond his years. "We found freedom. Shouldn't we help others find it too?" The question hung in the air, weighted with implication. To actively search for and assist others in similar situations would mean potentially exposing themselves to the very forces they had fled. The safe, quiet life they had built could be jeopardized. Yet as Kalen looked at Lyra, he saw in her violet eyes the same resolution he felt forming in his own heart. They had not merely survived their ordeal. They had transcended it. The family they had forged in the crucible of Xylos had emerged stronger, more resilient, and ultimately more compassionate. "Yes," Lyra said, her hand finding Kalen's as it had that pivotal night in the research station years before. "Freedom for all, or freedom for none." Kalen nodded, squeezing her hand in affirmation. "We'll be careful, strategic, but yes, we'll help where we can." Kale's face brightened, the luminescent patterns beneath his skin, fainter than his mother's, but still visible in moments of strong emotion, pulsing with joy. "I already received a signal," he admitted. "Weak but distinct. Someone like Miranda, but fighting the control more actively." "Then we have work to do," Kalen said, his engineer's mind already analyzing the challenges and possibilities. Together, as a family. As twilight descended over their adopted home, the three stood united in their garden, surrounded by the plants that had journeyed with them from Xylos, illuminated by the reflected light of twin moons on the nearby lake. They were no longer fugitives defined by what they fled, but pioneers defined by what they sought to build, not just for themselves, but for others like them. The wounds of their past had not vanished, but had healed into scars that strengthened rather than weakened them. The pain that had once isolated Kalen had ultimately connected him to a family and purpose he could never have imagined in his darkest days on Xylos. Lyra's captivity had led eventually to a freedom more complete than simple escape. And Kale, created as a weapon, had become instead a beacon for those still trapped in darkness. Life had emerged, against all odds, from the most hostile of environments. And now, that life reached back to extend the same possibility to others. "Family," Lyra said softly, her arm around Kale, her hand still linked with Kalen's. "Family," they echoed together as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, not as distant cold observers, but as reminders that even in the vastness of space, connections could be forged that defied distance, defied difference, and ultimately defied destiny itself.